Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to yet another edition of Truth to Power here on ITV Networks, channel 347 on DSTV. My name is Faraz Patel. Well, of course, last week you heard part one with my conversation with UDM leader Bantu Holomisa. This next 1 hour, we're going to be having part two with the discussion with the UDM leader, Mr. Bantu Holomisa. So again, you'll be in my company for the next 1 hour. Mr. Holomisa, thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. Holomisa, let's talk about the current day political landscape. Many parties, we've got the ruling party that still holds that sense of majority, the seats within the parliament. It's all good and well holding that. But every single person, every single tax-paying South Africa always looks at it and says the service delivery is not there. The basic human needs are not there. How bad has it become within this current political landscape?
Well, there has been some pluses and minuses. Pluses in the sense that since 1994, there are some communities who for the first time have access to electricity, water, and also there's a noise around free education, which has been implemented. We might differ in terms of whether it's perfect or not. South Africa is back into the international arena, and we have access to a number of resources in terms of whether you talk Globe Fund for Environment, you talk World Bank for development of the infrastructure. Yes, there are a lot of opportunities. However, the issue at home is not that the South Africans would have not tolerated the situation. But what makes South Africans angry is the high level of corruption, where the politicians who are elected end up usurping the powers of the accounting officers and dictate as to who must be given a tender, this and this and that. That has infuriated a lot of people. Even when there is that service delivery, the quality is questionable. So the political landscape as a result of those complaints, if you look at the size of the majority party, the ANC in parliament, is reducing, is getting down every 5 years. The ANC, of course, did introduce a security, what do you call it?
Cluster.
No, they introduced one of the best social securities in the continent and to some extent some developing world. But my main worry is that the day that we are unable to service that security is going to be problematic, because if we don't bake the cake so that we can divide it amongst the people, then this is when you will see a march towards a second revolution, which there are signs already. If you look at the people defying police, destroying government properties, so you could easily say we're already on the second phase of a revolution.
And that is something that Kosatu said in this month, that South Africa is heading towards a failed state by 2030 if the government does not sort out the issues that the country is currently having. Mr. Holomisa,
but they are opportunistic. They are opportunists.
Do you think that they're speaking from a tripartite alliance perspective?
They are part and parcel of this chaos we are seeing. From 1994, when the ANC started with their RTP policy, and then there was GEAR, there was ASGISA, there's this and National Development Plan. All the time, they always oppose those. But when they go to the elections, they will say, yeah, it's our NDP, and support the ANC. I don't buy that. They are hypocrites, to say the right word, because they cannot say now it's the ANC. Their members are in the cabinet. They've deployed. Their members are in parliament. So I don't buy that nonsense of theirs. It's being opportunistic.
Now that you bring it up, Mr. Olamisa, I mean, they are part of the tripartite alliance, but it was Cosatu in the SACP, you know, calling President Cyril Ramaphosa leaderless. But, I mean...
They elected him.
They elected him. So...
Even that attitude is the one which is handicapping Netleg.
Yes.
Because as long as there's tension between business, labor, and government,
Yes.
we will never see any economic development in this country. That's why we said long time ago, dissolve this nonsense called Netleg. Instead, let us have an economic indaba, which will emerge for the first time with a policy of a macroeconomic policy. Because since 1994, there has not been any consensus on what kind of macroeconomic policy this country must have. Because the ANC ministers or the cabinet will announce something, there goes the SACP and COSATU says nonsense, but they don't produce or table an alternative. Who is going to come and invest in South Africa if there's political uncertainty?
And that leads to the next question. You've got Mr. Bladin Zimande, who's part of the SACP, but he's a cabinet minister. I wanted to get your view on this. Do you feel that those who are part of the tripartite alliance and are part of cabinet, don't you think there's a conflict of interest there to a certain extent?
In fact, the tripartite alliance, I think it has outlived its life. It was relevant at some stage of the history of the struggle. But I think ANC should stand up as African National Congress, because the people of South Africa, they give mandate to the ANC, not to the tripartite alliance. These spoilers and other corrupt element are frustrating this country. So the sooner they stand alone, the better.
Mr. Olamisa, economic freedom. You can achieve the normal freedom, the freedom of, roaming around. And as you mentioned, 1994, South Africa allowed back into the international arena, be it sports, economy, whatever the case may be in terms of allowing South Africa that sort of international recognition. But economic freedom is still something that many black South Africans are yearning for. But if the economy is still in the hands of the minority, how is that going to be achieved?
Unfortunately, that one doesn't need a rhetoric answer. We need to pull up our socks and say, when the Afrikaners were poor after they were dominated by English people, they put systems in place to deal with the Afrikaner poor position. In this country, since 1994, we still expect 54 million blacks to go and queue in a line and look for a job in companies which are owned by 3 million white population, not even 3 million, maybe 200,000 people are owning those companies. Now, what we need to do is to say, how can we invest in the majority citizens to become wealth creators so that they can create jobs? We need to seriously consider talking about establishing a national fund and also establish sector banks, textile, IT, agriculture, yes, steel. So establish those sector banks, or even if there is a need, you can begin to convert some of the sitters, which are just chowing those billions and not producing anybody. and they start doing those and train people and empower those people, give them funding, it's not going to work to say, I'm going to go and get the money from Mr. Van Tonder. He's not even here. He's in Canada. He's left his property. He's renting it to you. So
Mr. Holomisa, we are gonna come back later on in part 2 to talk about the current state of the government. But before we go to the break, you spoke about how the Afrikaner during the time when obviously English colonialism had ended, and how they were able to establish their own banks, their own insurance companies, Sanlam, what do you call Volkskas Bank, Volkskas Bank. The list goes on through companies like Remgro and businessmen from Stellenbosch, the names of Johan Rupert, Christo Visa, of course, Shoprite Group. The list goes on. Surely there is something that the current government can look at and say, if they could do it,
why can't we do
why
it?
can't we do it with a minority group doing it when the resources are there for us? Why can't we do it where there can be that sense of non-slavery to the other companies owned by the minority? Why isn't that being executed?
I really don't know, because it's not a question of saying we don't have cash.
Yes, that's it. There is resources.
We have resources. But what perhaps we have, the reason why we are at this stage was to think that the BEE, the way it was structured, it would deliver. Because BEE, as it was structured, didn't give you any control, no ownership. It was minimum of 25%. So meaning, therefore, perpetually in any boardroom, you are nothing. Right? It has served its purpose, but now we need to channel the resources properly. Per annum, we lose about 40 to 50 billion rands as per the Auditor General. Imagine if we were to invest those monies to these sectors I was mentioning. So it's unfortunate, and it looks as though the comrades, when they came back, the snares were already put in place for them. You fall this side, you try to put your feet, you fall to another one. Because if you look at this, what's happening now, it's not ANC companies which have corrupted their comrades. It's the S01 oppressors companies which are shaming them. So we have to some stage to draw a line and say, guys, how can we empower our own people to be wealth creators? It's unfortunate. We've wasted almost 26 years. Not a single manufacturer you can point and say, this one is a manufacturer of note. He has employed 100, 200, 3,000 people from the black community.
And unfortunately, that currently remains the rhetoric of South Africa at this moment. We'll be back with a conversation with Mr. Bantu Holomisa. This is part 2 of my discussion with the UDM leader. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Truth to Power. This is part 2 of my conversation with Mr. Bantu Holomisa. Mr. Holomisa, I just want to look at the modern day UDM, and I want to focus on the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. Mongameli Bobani, of course, when he was elected as the mayor, it's no secret that the DA and, of course, Ethel Trollop did everything in their power to want to take him out of power. And, of course, it was to and from the court cases that were happening. Do you felt that Mr. Bobani at the time was being seen as being treated unfairly during his time and, of course, subsequent and pre to him becoming mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay Metro?
It is unfortunate that a model which would have been used in terms of justifying the coalition government. That opportunity was squandered by all those who established the coalition because of personality clashes between Trolip and Bobani. You will recall at that stage we even said there must be an internal inquiry, which was done by ACDP, COPE and another party. And they came back to say there's nothing related to corruption here. This is a clash of two individuals. And we said, please talk to each other. And unfortunately, they started to accuse each other of corruption. And then when Trolip said Bobani is corrupt, we said, no, Chief, don't come to us. Go to the council, you get a resolution, appoint an inquiry. Indeed, the PwC was appointed, but the final reports came back without mentioning the name of Bobani. And we said to him then, why must we remove Bobani? Because you just don't want him. I said, we don't work like that in the UTM. So if you have got evidence, table to the council. Council will take a resolution. Maybe it will refer to ethics committee. If the ethics committee says Bobani is wrong, then we can act, but not because to want to please you. The era of Baskap mentality is over.
And that was the thing, Mr. Olamisa. At the end of the day, it's service delivery.
Yeah.
Why didn't the DA at the time say, let's use the constituency that the UDM has within Nelson Mandela Bay Metro? Because it's no secret that the constituency is strong within the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro for the UDM. So why didn't they use that in terms of having that coalition government and saying, let's deliver service to the people of the Metro? Why did there have to be a personality clash? Because that is something that a lot of people are saying, well, it's just going to hurt the people more than
I really
yes.
can't answer that question because that's maybe a DA person would have handled it better. But the irony of the whole thing, when Bobani left and the UTM says, okay, DA, you don't want us, so they worked with other parties and they formed the government. Hence, Bobani was appointed mayor. Now, the DA and ANC are running after Bobani to say he must work with us, we must do that. I found that it's nothing else but manipulation of the situation. But ANC, Trolip is out and his DA. ANC is not in charge. I think there are about few councillors. But Bobani is still this glue in that part of the world. Although he's not a mayor, but he's working with the EXCO, he's in the EXCO. And we are still waiting for the police or Hawks to arrest him. Because PwC report says, no, I don't know what Trolip's agenda is now. He flooded us with a lot of documentation, letters. I said, no, we can't micromanage the municipality and my man and others. If you have problems, go to the council. Don't use us. Because now you are dividing even the leadership at national level. But thanks God, he's gone. My man who didn't listen is gone as well.
And the PwC report, of course, had acquitted Mr. Bobani of any wrongdoing. Mr. Olamisa, coalition governments, on face value, it's meant to work in a democratic country. But we've seen in South Africa that there have been, how do I say, it's a trial and error situation. I'm going to take Tshwane Metro, for example. I mean, that metro at this moment, it's in limbo. Is there still a future for coalition governments in South Africa?
Whether we like it or not, the coalition are not done by design of political parties. The voters force us to that. But what is needed here is we need to be mature about the issue of coalitions. I'm hoping that all these ups and downs we have witnessed are going to serve as a lesson for us. But what we need to do perhaps as newcomers in this, we need to have rules and regulations that in the event that there is no winner and then you are forced to coalition, this is how it is run. If you spoil, this is the punishment. If you are filibustering, this is what is going to happen. And give more power to the voters.
Yes. Ms. Holomisa, to wrap up the section before we go to the break, the Constitutional Court back in June had announced that independent candidates can now run for elections. Of course, this is still something that's going to be subjected to the IEC, but when you look at the parties that, well, the parties' movements, sort of Action SA, Herman Mashaba, Musi Maimane, One Movement South Africa, how good is it having independent candidates there, and what does it do for taking votes away from the major parties? I know John Steenhuisen was not happy about it because he said that it, and I quote him saying that it takes away votes within the DA. So what is your take on the Constitutional Court ruling with independent candidates?
We welcome the Constitutional Court ruling, and I wish that they could have gone a step further and instruct Parliament to develop constituency-based system, plus, of course, proportional representation. And even go further to say the people should have should elect directly their own president. In that way, you would build in the concept of accountability and promote the checks and balances. Currently, I'm sure you don't even know who's your MP.
Yes.
So what we need to do is to look at the Electoral Act holistically and start introducing constituency-based system to the current system. Independence, you are free. So we welcome that.
I'm in conversation with Mr. Bantu Holomisa. This is part 2 of my exclusive interview with the UDM leader. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to Truth to Power. This is part 2 with my conversation with the leader of the UDM, Mr. Bantu Holomisa. Mr. Holomisa, corruption. It's become now the word that we see every single day in media houses. I know I report on it every single day. How has corruption seeped into the leadership of our country? You spoke about it during part 1 of the conversation, that you first identified corruption in the Transkei government with Matanzima and Stel. How is it now filtered into a movement of liberation, which was, of course, which is the ANC still, and seen that it's just become so rotten to the core?
Well, we must blame power. Power corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
This thing started as early as 1994, when Sarafina II saga hit the street, and it was not investigated thoroughly, or people were not charged. 48 million just vanished.
And it was just the start.
That was the start. And it became worse when they came up with the deployment policies of their own cadres. You appoint your own DG as a minister, then obviously that's where it starts. So if Luthuli House says, man, we need money for salaries, give that tender to so-and-so. That's how it started. Then other members now ended up being glued into the troughs. And they are unable to extricate themselves. So it's a man-made exercise. And also, when the white South African companies, owners of those companies, they were told that you are not going to get a business unless you have a PE partner. And these PE partners are also taken from the pockets of the ANC. And they manipulated them. Say, all right, go and talk to Luthuli House or that department, and then I will give you something. You can't, it's easy, it's there for you to read it. You can't tell me that if in 1995, 96, up to year 2000, you are not a top civil servant, but immediately you are appointed as a councillor or a minister, then you can go and live in a golf estate. I've been in the government since 1976. I don't dream of go and live there and pay the exorbitant price to buy that house in the first instance. These fellows came so late, and then all of a sudden, their opulence lifestyle is questionable. But if we were to do auditing, lifestyle auditing, it's just that now we are reacting. Lifestyle auditing, it would have been worse.
Mr. Holomisa, we talk about lifestyle auditing. I mean, during the 10 years of President Jacob Zuma, we saw the lifestyle that a lot of the ANC MPs had enjoyed when, of course, state capture was at its height. Of course, NASRAC happens and President Cyril Ramaphosa comes in. He was seen as somebody who is going to be the crusader against corruption. We've seen arrests, we haven't seen prosecutions. They have been few and far between. In his 32 months as president, have you seen enough to suggest that he's going to be there longer than one term? Because the discussions are there that he may just be that one-term president.
Well, let's tackle the first part of your question.
Arrest and prosecution.
Yes, not much has been seen. We must also remember that he inherited a bureaucracy which was established by Zuma. Whether you go to intelligence, you go to defense, you go to police, you go to NPA, that was the team which was set by Zuma. So Cyril came in as honest fellow. He says, no, these are our comrades. So let's try and talk to them. But it took them time. And until he introduced Batoyi, then you are beginning to see, although she's slow, but you're beginning to see a little bit of teeth coming out in the open. There's no way that Cyril would have dealt with corruption alone. If he wanted to do so, he should have brought new cabinet ministers, changed directors general, and say from now on, this is the route we're going to follow. But to rely to people who were deployed there by Zuma and others, or by Luthuli House, or by a faction which is associated with the previous leadership, he is going to fail. But Cyril, by nature, is not like us. I'm a soldier, so you identify the problem, you come up with the plan, you come up with tools to implement the plan and the funding. Cyril is a process person. That patience sometimes of his is costing the country. So he will wait, this stage, it's going to the police and the Hawks and this and that. You wait for that. But we are telling you that the people who are manning these institutions are not yours.
Yes.
They are serving another leader.
And that's where my next question comes, Mr. Holomisa. Obviously, Didi Mabuza coming in as the deputy would be seen as the unity. And we all knew about that during NASRAC and the conference there. Everyone knows about the RET faction, or the so-called RET faction of President Jacob Zuma. And then, of course, you got the New Dawn faction. How President Ramaphosa may want to execute a number of policies, and of course, you spoke about the NPA and changing these sort of authorities, deployees within authorities. But how much is he hindered by those who are loyal to President or former President Jacob Zuma? Because a few weeks ago, I had the MKMVA, one of the NEC members, Mr. Carl Niau, somebody that you know quite well, and you could sense that the loyalty to President Zuma, former President Zuma, is still there. So how much is that faction within the ANC hindering anything President Ramaphosa wants to execute?
Don't call it faction, call it a lack of discipline.
Okay.
Lack of discipline amongst the members of the ANC, because a resolution was taken in their conference that Cyril Ramaphosa and your executive, please clean. So Cyril is implementing that, but there are people who are calling him names when he is doing that and his cabinet. So that means there's lack of discipline within the ANC. I mean, look at people who are writing open letters, attacking him. Cited
Former President Zuma,
Kalne House and so on. So it's a free-for-all. It's a culture which is not known in the ANC. And it's going to take some years. Cyril might start, he may not complete the cycle to return the ANC to its former glory. But there's no discipline there, simple as that. Hence, you'll find that the looting is being done with impunity. So everybody knows that, okay, the money is given to the ministers or top six, and everybody says, no, where's my cut? You can't run a country like that. So they will still have to draw this line on the sand, but it must be deep, not just a line.
And that's where you speak about the looting. COVID-19 comes, huge litmus test for the government in terms of, okay, the 500 billion rand stimulus package is of course allocated, and we're all hoping that, okay, looting mustn't come. 2 months ago, we see PPE tender fraud and corruption, and it's not just down to, you know, Dr. Bandile Masuku being alleged to have been involved, but it's so many other people.
No,
surely the government...
No, we must say thank you to the factions of the ANC, because they have been doing this for years, using the state resources. But since another faction is not eating, there's a new faction which said it's our turn to eat. Now that bureaucracy which I said belonged to the old regime is the one which is exposing this newly appointed regime, which came on a ticket of anti-corruption. So it's like, let's bite them. Look at them. They said they are here to fight corruption. Look, this is what they are doing. So in a way, these factions have helped to expose the degree of this corruption.
And of course, it wasn't just one bite, it's been many bites that have happened within what we have seen during COVID-19. Well, the conversation continues after the break. It will be, of course, the last section of what has been a marathon 2-hour discussion, of course, part 1, which was last week, and part 2, which is this week. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned to ITV Networks on Truth to Power, and we'll be back to wrap up the conversation with Mr. Bantu Holomisa. Welcome back to Truth to Power here on ITV Networks. This is the last section of a 2-hour marathon in my exclusive interview with Mr. Bantu Holomisa. Mr. Holomisa, blue-collar crime, there's no two ways about it that it has hit South Africa very, very hard, be it Bosasa, be it Steinhoff, be it the VBS bank, mutual bank scandal that has happened. We see the Hawks and the NPA acting. We, of course, see arrests that are happening, but we're not seeing out-and-out prosecutions. Now, when we see what's happening with regards to the Free State asbestos saga, state capture, the inquiry, of course, exposing what is going on at this moment. But if the prosecutions are not happening to high-profile people, and it's happening to people who are lower than the high-profile ones, is that something that we can see any sort of light at the end of the tunnel for?
Well, firstly, I think we must acknowledge the steps taken by NPA and Hawks. We have not seen the arrest of political honchos for quite some time. It was during the period of Mbeki when we had
Scorpions,
Salebe and so on. Under Zuma and Cyril's administrations, we didn't see much. What we would like to see is for the Minister of Justice to say, notwithstanding the limited powers of mine in terms of interfering in the judicial matters, but I have since spoken to the Chief Justice that he must establish special courts to deal with corruption. Because if he doesn't do that, or the government doesn't do that, the confidence of the people is going to wane quickly. You remember the VBS arrests.
Yes.
Even then, there were hopes. But after that, nothing happened. And now, people are beginning to ask, what's the point of saying you arrested so many people, but you are not prosecuting them? So Cyril and Minister of Justice should seriously have coffee with the Chief Justice to say, please, can we make sure that there are special courts like we did in 2010 World Cup? So that would serve as a deterrent. The current crop of implicated people, especially those who are in the cabinet, this is where Cyril should lead by example and tell the ministers, look, you are implicated, please take a leave, and then we appoint an acting, or we remove you. You will be brought back in the cabinet in the next reshuffle or whatever elections.
But does he have, how would they say, the guts to execute that?
I'm not sure, but the laws of this country allows him. He is the person who appoints and dismisses cabinet. But there are times where you, as a leader, you consult. But your consultation must never be intended to derail your program. But if he's going to say, look, guys, we are on the receiving end because of ministers X, and we were told they received money, and they confirm that, yes, we did receive money, but it was not for that. We are not judges. Those ministers should go home and wait for their fate. We don't have contracts with ministers. Balance of probabilities is sufficient enough to say, go in the interest of the country. But if he is going to say, I must go and consult in a world of factions, he will never move.
Okay. And that's the thing, Mr. Holomisa. As a democracy, we have three arms of the state: executive, legislature, and judiciary. Those are the powers that can be used to go ahead and hold ministers or anyone taking oaths of office to account. Surely that should mean for something.
Yes, as I said, we don't have contracts with ministers. You're not going to be taken to labor court.
Yes.
Go. Your fate will be decided by the courts, but I cannot keep you here.
And of course, we can also use that as a football perspective, but that's a conversation we'll have another day, Mr. Holomisa. Mr. Holomisa, you've publicly called for the dissolution of cabinet because of these allegations of corruption. But the Constitution, what needs to change there for it to happen? What amending needs to happen? And then, of course, how do we bring civil society and those who have the interests of the country at heart to make the necessary changes?
The reason why I called for the dissolution of the cabinet was because I felt that ANC cannot judge itself. Because almost all of them there, they are sort of caught their fingers in the till. So I said, they must go. Go and clean yourselves outside government and talk unity outside government, because all this nonsense is affecting service delivery. And then up until 2024, in the meantime, put an interim government. That interim government must look at the laws we have, especially those who are intended to fight corruption. That interim government would have made it a point that the monies which were taken out of the state are paid back, including political parties which have used their power to give tenders to Company X and use that Company X as a conduit to pass that money back to the party coffers. ANC cannot do that. But if you had interim arrangement, it can be done. So, but constitutionally, yes, we know there's no provision for that. But how many governments have been told to sit down without following a constitution? Some of the government, on their own volition, would say, no, we will go and sort out our things. Let's have an interim government. And we said as UTM, we don't need to have any political representatives in that interim government. Let it be an independent, drawn from civil society, and make sure that the resources of this country are protected. But when we come in 2024, there will be new laws which would not be favoring any player. Because currently we make laws to favor us. But the ANC itself is the one which is under trial now. The Bosasa issues, Chancellor House Company, which partnered with Hitachi, and they siphoned billions from Eskom. Now we are being asked to bail out Eskom. And that money went to Lutuli House. So these guys will never clean themselves. The only thing which must be done, show that cabinet of Cyril Ramaphosa the door in the interest of the country. He is struggling now to clean corruption because he's alone.
Mr. Holomisa, that's where it comes to the next question. Power to the people. Liberation movements were based on people and how they would put trust into those representing them, especially against the apartheid regime, which was that evil. How do we get power back to the people? Because we see that there is no power to its citizens. Unemployment is high, the GDP is contracting. Yes, COVID-19 has played its part, but we were in a recession even before the lockdown had happened. How do we get power back to the people and start holding these accountability issues? Because that is what citizens want. They want the accountability. What needs to be done in order for that to happen so that citizens can enjoy the fruits of a democracy like ours?
Maybe we should start looking at our electoral system with a view to introduce a constituency-based system. You mix it with the current system, proportional representation, And also that the people of South Africa must elect their own president directly, rather than relying on 4,500 delegates who are going to come up with a rogue president because he knows how to shout, Viva, Viva, Mandla. Then if we, unfortunately, that's the only way. Because when I introduced the issue of interim government, yes, Constitution doesn't allow that. But if people were to do it voluntarily, sometimes they are pushed because people march through the streets to say so-and-so must go. But we have not yet reached that stage. Maybe when we talk about state of emergency, you can still make sure that you remove those ministers, and then the interim comes. Various ways of, like I intervened in Transkei, it worked. Because the benefit was for the people on the ground, free politicking, job creation, and so on. So there are various methods, but for now, the people must demand that the new electoral act must be introduced without delay, so that they can begin to identify who would be their MPs within the parties or outside parties as independents, as the Constitutional Court has ruled.
Mr. Holomisa, one final question. You're not that old. If anyone wants to see the age of Mr. Holomisa, they can go to Wikipedia and you can find it out. How long do you plan to stay in politics? That is the golden question, because a lot of, you can go, you can go back to the Eastern Cape, you can retire, you can, be with your family, but there's still the hunger and passion of politics and the hunger of passion of wanting to see change within South Africa.
5 years ago, I turned 60.
Yes.
So they say the life in politics starts at 60.
Wow. So you're just getting started?
Yes.
Okay.
But on a serious note, normally things like your health determines whether you still have a stamina, or alternatively, you want to live now, but your party says you are not ready. You can't leave us. So far, to be honest with you, has not yet dawned in my vocabulary that I need to throw a towel or raise a white flag. I'm still occupying the crease, and I'm still hitting 4s and 6s.
Yes.
Especially around the anti-corruption.
Yes. Because you started at a very young age, in your 20s, of course.
I was
when
32,
you were 32
when I was head of Transkei government.
So you were already a leader at the age of 32. And I think that is something, just to wrap it up, your advice to young leaders out there that want to make a change, especially the ones that are looking at the political landscape and saying, I can make the change.
They must continue like we have seen them in Parliament. If you look at the breakdown of the members of Parliament, in UDM I have my deputy who is young, and then EFF you see young blood. The ANC this time around, after 2019 election, brought young fellows. Yes, but what you need to do is introduce the youth. Some people must nurture them, especially on lawmaking. You need experienced people there to say, guys, in terms of constitution, in terms of that, you are not representing youth only here. You have magogos, you have this and that. So make sure that you come up with an integrated policy. In doing so, you still have to retain some of the experienced MPs.
Mr. Bantu Holomisa, that wraps up what has been an interesting 2-hour conversation. We thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you longer in politics because, as a kid growing up, we've seen you in Parliament, we've enjoyed your interaction, but most importantly, it's the political education that you've given us,
Thank you.
Those who do political journalism, And, long may you last. May the Almighty grant you many, many more years to be with us and to keep, as you say, batting for anti-corruption.
Thank you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Well, there we go. It's been a 2-hour marathon with one of the great political heads of South Africa. It's none other than Mr. Bantu Holomisa. And that's all we have for you on Truth to Power. I will see you again, same time, same place next week. To enjoy the rest of the week and weekend. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.